Let me say that our speaker today is Peter Meggison from Massachusetts. Peter is a longtime friend of Don Brown and Dennis McBurney, and he started coming to Kansas several years ago for the Wichita Postcard Club show in October. He collects several topics, including the one he is telling us about today. And this will be the Appalachian Mountain Club postcards of Guy Shorey. Thanks very much, Peter, for being here. And by the way, what is all of that behind you?
Well, it's postcards, of course. This is a portion of my collection. I would say it's about 40 to 45%. These are postcards from all the states of the United States except Massachusetts. Those are separate and they're categorized alphabetically, and then topics within the geographic designation by state. But what you see on the boxes are from large letter postcards. Large letter postcards were really the first thing I started to collect back in 1963 when I got into postcard clubs. And so I have thousands of duplicate LLs, we refer to them as. So at one point, maybe about 25 years ago, when I was using archival boxes and so forth, I took these duplicates and I made colored photocopies of them, and they're on the boxes. So those are from large letter postcards. So if I'm looking for a particular town in a particular state, it's very easy to find. Okay, so I want to give you a little bit of background, first of all, on the Appalachian Mountain Club itself. The Appalachian Mountain Club was founded in 1876. So next year, it's 150 years, and there will be a very big celebration. It was founded in Boston by Brahmins for Brahmins. In other words, you had to have a lot of money to belong to the Appalachian Mountain Club. It was founded by academics at Harvard, MIT, and Bill Burton will be glad to hear this, at Dartmouth also. They were the original impetus, as it were, between the among the activities of hiking in the mountains of New Hampshire. Today, the Appalachian Mountain Club has 90,000 members. It's the largest outdoor organization in the United States. But originally, 150, 100 years ago, it was very restrictive. Recently, in the spring summer issue of Appalachia, which is a journal of the Appalachian Mountain Club, a very professional journal, there was an article on recruitment practices of the Appalachian Mountain Club in the early days. And would you believe that Jews, Catholics, old ladies, and party boys were not allowed? Of course, we may view that as funny today, but obviously everyone is welcome. We just had a meeting 1 month ago today on the Cape of the Southeast chapter of the Appalachian Mountain Club, which I'm a member of. There were about 150 people there, and the speaker was a black man from New York who recently wrote a book on his hiking experiences throughout the world. Nevertheless, there was not one black person in the audience. So I think it's like postcard clubs. And I know at the York show and at the Wichita show, there were no black people. I think it's a sociological thing. And the Appalachian Mountain Club has really made an endeavor to encourage Black people to participate in its activities. Its activities include a lot of environmental issues today. As far as sporting, it's chiefly hiking, but other things like kayaking and cross-country skiing and a whole array of other things are part of the activities that you can participate in as a member. In fact, right now, I saw online that AMC has a half price bargain admission. So if you want to join now, you can join at half the normal cost, which is not very much. It's about $25 or $30. So that's a little bit of background. It does have 700 paid employees today, and there are chapters, 11 different chapters, and those are as far north in Maine and as far south as Virginia. So if you want to get involved with outdoor activities, this is a good place to start. Okay, I'm going to be talking about Guy Shorey. He joined the Appalachian Mountain Club in 1905 at age 24. He's known, he's respected, and his photography is liked because he took pictures from the mountains out, from the inside out, not the other way around, as most photographers would do from a road. Shorey was part of a welcoming group in Gorham, New Hampshire. Gorham, New Hampshire is located in what's referred to as the Eastern Slope. That includes North Conway, through Pinkham Notch, Jackson, Gorham, and also Berlin, which is just north of Gorham. That's the area that he focused on. I would say that 90% of his cards are in that area. He did use the other parts of the White Mountains, but that's what he focused on. So he was part of a welcoming group of hikers who would arrive by train from Boston or elsewhere and who would stay at the Mount Madison House in Gorham, opposite the train station, or perhaps the Ravine House in nearby Randolph, among others. He would hike with them, take pictures, and then go to his studio and have them developed when he got home, often onto postcards. He would then return the next day. Obviously, these people who were coming from Boston would stay for several days, and he would present the pictures to them for sale. So he is quite entrepreneurial. This postcard is not a Shorey postcard. It's an Easton Illustrating postcard, which is a very, very well-developed postcard publisher throughout the 20th century, and they still publish chrome postcards in Maine. Shorey postcards were, Easton Illustrating postcards were available in the 6 New England states as well as New York. And they are really nice postcards. This postcard shows the Shorey studio on the left. In the building, Gorham Savings Bank, which still stands today, was the northern headquarters of the Appalachian Mountain Club. Whether Shorey took this picture or not, we don't know. However, it is a very, very nice card. If you know Brewster Harding, he was a dealer at the York Show, very well-known New England dealer. He's done a lot of research on these postcards by Easton Illustrating. In fact, he's written 2 books on them. This postcard shows the emblem, the back of Shorey postcards from about 1918 on. He started producing postcards in 1908 and went until 1958. He died in 1961, so he used those negatives throughout his life. Notice it says, "Among the White Hills." That was his insignia, and the picture that you see is the famous Old Man of the Mountain. The Old Man of the Mountain, though, is not located in the eastern slope. It's on the western side of the White Mountains. And you may recall that in 2003, the old man fell. It no longer exists. The rocks fell apart. And needless to say, it really is a symbol of New Hampshire, and there are still postcards for sale of the Old Man of the Mountain. And I would very easily say that there are more postcards of the Old Man of the Mountain than any other White Mountain postcard. This is a book that came out about Guy Shorey's photography in 1998. It's a coffee table style book, and it really is quite nice. It shows many postcards in the book, but all kinds of his photography. Okay, so this presentation now of his postcards are divided into categories that are pretty much in alphabetical order. And the first category is August Camp. August Camp is an activity that still takes place today, obviously in the month of August. It's a month long. Hikers get together and they go to a particular location and do various activities for a week at a time. So you can sign up for August Camp for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks. In recent years, most August camps have been held in the Pacific Northwest, the Cascades, the Oregon coast, and those areas. But in the early days, it was in the White Mountains area. Here's a picture of August Camp in Grafton, Maine. His photography, his postcards are very easy to recognize. They all have a white border and are either sepia or black and white. Now, my question to you is, do you, and think about this, do you consider this a real photo postcard? And we'll talk more about that. Here's another one of August Camp, about 1910 in Grafton, Maine. When I was putting together this presentation with the new version of PowerPoint, AI is in it by default, and they were offering suggestions for the names of the slides. And the suggestion from AI was tents in a field. Well, I didn't use that. It's August Camp, about 1910 in Grafton, Maine. And I would have to say that this is definitely a real photo postcard. Here's another example of August Camp. And this is in Wildwood, New Hampshire, which is on the western side. And there's a message here that's kind of interesting on the back of the card. Actually, it's on this one. Again, in Grafton, Maine. Grafton, Maine is very close to Gorham, New Hampshire. In fact, borders it. So this part of New Hampshire that I'm talking about straddles Maine. And the message says, just a line to let you know I am still running up a mountain and down one every day. This is the view from my tent. See, people sleep in tents here, large tents, and they bring in water. How they were doing it 100+ years ago, I'm not sure, though. In fact, I can lie in bed and see it. So you see, I am perfectly placed. Hope you can come to August Camp sometime. There is nothing like it. Here's another one that shows the primitive nature of August Camp, and it's postmarked Weld, Maine. And it says, showing a bit of our home life and the situation at the camp. There are open fields where the sleeping tents are pitched. Yesterday, we returned from a 2-day trip to a remote valley between two mountains, very wild and on a pond with fish leaping by the hundreds. Love, Ruth. Here's another one at the Dolly Cop campground in the Pinkham Knot section of New Hampshire. Dolly Cop is actually still exists. Dolly Cop was a person, and it has historical significance. Dolly was a woman, obviously, and it does have significance to this section of New Hampshire. And on this card, I'm not going to read you many messages, but these are kind of interesting on the August camp cards. It says, thought you'd like this photograph of a view from our campground to the Imp and the Carter Range. The Imp happens to be a particular mountain. Imp Hill is in the center, a nice little climb with good views from the top. Have also climbed Mariah and Pine Mountain, the northernmost of the presidential range. But we have a great deal of rain this week and last. Nice crowd here, Miriam. The Carter Notch Hut is part of the hut system of the Appalachian Mountain Club. There are 11 huts that through hikers use to traverse the White Mountains. Here's a very early postcard. So this would be about 1908 or 1909 of the Carter Notch hut at the time. It's the oldest hut. It dates from 1876 when AMC was established. AMC built a log cabin pictured here in 1904. The building served as the United States Fire Warden Service headquarters. I want to point out to you the title on the card. Maybe you've seen these, and it, in effect, is a rubber stamp. And it's about the length of a pencil, maybe a little bit longer, and it's not concave, it would be flat. And the user would have to take each letter and place it on this device in order to create the rubber stamp that appears at the bottom of the postcard. So it's obviously a very tedious device. Later, Shorey used these same negatives on cards that he printed. He did have a numbering system, which is very, very useful, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later. This is also the same camp. However, this card is not numbered, which kind of complicates things, unfortunately, but nevertheless. And this shows clearly the Carter Notch hut, which was built in 1915. And look at the participants. This is a long hike. To get here from the road, for most people, would be about 6 hours for the average hiker, through very difficult hiking. Not hiking in the White Mountains is not easy hiking at all. Two people are dressed, the men on the right seem to be dressed in suits. There's a young man there, a woman, and I guess the people on the left more look like hikers. But anyway, they certainly don't look like people who would be hiking today. And here's the interior of the Carter Notch hut. Notice the detail, the cot on the left. And if you looked at the postcard of the week that Hal put together, this postcard is there. However, that postcard has the rubber stamp printing at the bottom rather than a commercial type printing that would have been done with some type of printing press. Cold River is the next series that I'll show you. Cold River Camp is really a camp. It's not a hut. It's a very extensive area that straddles the New Hampshire and the Maine border. It has many buildings. Typically, people stay here for a week. It's like a vacation spot if you want to hike or just relax. There's a library actually in one of the buildings. There were so many postcards produced by Shorey of the Cold River Camp that he developed a special insignia for it for the Appalachian Mountain Club, Cold River Camp. Here's a real good view of Cold River Camp. Notice the number starts with C95. Again, this complicates things, but it shows one of the buildings and a range, Baldface Mountain. There's two of them, North Baldface and South Baldface. Beautiful views from the summits there. I've hiked both of them on one hiking excursion. It takes about 10 hours to hike both of them in one day, but it's a beautiful hike. And here's another one of the buildings. I'll show you some of these so you can get an idea of what is up there. So if you want a nice place to stay, this really is highly recommended. You don't have to hike. There's other activities that you can participate in. I don't know if they still have a barracks. I'm not sure. I was here last year, though, at this camp. This one is kind of interesting because it shows that the Cold River camps, and it says Maine. For the most part, it is in New Hampshire, but part of it is in Maine, the same geographic area. And notice it says CCC. So this would be the Civilian Conservation Corps, established by President Roosevelt in the early 1930s. My father was in the CCCs in Vermont. So it's kind of nice that that designation is on it. And this shows kids at a nice water sport activity. And this shows the interior of one of the buildings there. This is the main building for congregating. These buildings are still up and they pretty much look the same today as they did 100 years ago. And here's a nice one. It really has a homey type of appearance. And this guy, I did a little bit of research on him. His name is Larry Campbell. And in the 1930s, he was a leader at the Cold River Camp. He had a nickname, Larry's Lair. And I guess he was quite a popular leader, so I feel fortunate that I have a postcard that he signed. Now, here's a great postcard. This is of the post office at Cold River Camp. And it says, Mr. Charles. Evidently, he was quite a well-known person in this area, certainly intimidating with a hatchet. And notice the woman behind the door. She looks quite scared. Whether that was done intentionally or not, I don't know. This postcard is C34. On the next postcard, obviously taken the same day, C35, the guy with the hatchet is seated on the right. And the woman who was hiding is the second from the left. And so that's a nice card. So is this a real photo card or is just a photo card? My feeling is that this is a photo card, but not a real photo card. And the reason I say that is how many postcards would need to be produced? I think of real photo postcards as having a minimum number and definitely not a printed caption. About 25 or 30 years ago, there was an article, either in Bars or Postcard Collector, I can't remember which, about real photo postcards. And the premise of the author was that there is a difference. And collectors, unfortunately, categorize any type of photographic postcard as a real photo postcard, but it's not. If you were to go on eBay, and I know you do, it's almost the default RPCC, real photo postcard. This is a really nice postcard, but is it real photo? Dennis McBurney is doing some research for Don Brown of the American Institute of Deltiology. Don was telling me this a few weeks ago, and I asked Dennis if he is able to locate that article to send it to me, because I'd like to read it again. But anyway, I don't know how you feel about that, but if you go to shows, real photo postcards and real photo postcards, I think there is a difference. AMC events, well, Appalachian Mountain Clubs has tons of events throughout the years, and apparently they always have. This one is dated at the bottom, 1918, and there's an AMC flag at the Ravine House at Randolph, New Hampshire, which is just to the west of Gorham. I'm not sure what the event was. This is a great card, and it shows that the Willie Slide of 1826 is being commemorated on this AMC float. You can read the sign on the card. What the event was in August 1826. 7 members of the Willie family and 2 hired men perished in a slide brought about by floods in the Crawford Notch section of that's near what we call the Kankamangas Highway today. It's in that section, and it is commemorated every year. There's a monument there. There's a mountain even called Mount Willie. So that's quite a nice card, I feel, commemorating that event. Notice it's not numbered. What you see over on the right, the 39, is my numbers. I use numbering when I prepared this presentation. Evans Notch hut is a typical small hut. It no longer exists. That was near the Cold River huts. And notice the signs all put up by AMC. The Galehead hut that you see here was torn down in 1999. It's on Mount Galehead, which is one of the 4,000 footers. I'll explain about that in a minute. It was torn down to make accommodations for handicapped people. And so if you wanted to hike Galehead, Mount Galehead, which is typically a rather difficult hike for the average person, they've made it, and AMC was the impetus behind this, they've made it so that a person that has certain handicaps can be led up the mountain and get to the top of it. So it's really to accommodate. It's quite a feat that they were able to do that. Here's another view of Galehead. This is the old Galehead. As I said, it doesn't exist anymore. And I'm showing you Shorey postcards from the AMC. Many, many other postcards exist of the Appalachian Mountain Club by other publishers. In the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, there were many postcards, chrome postcards, put out by Mike Roberts. of California. They had a Boston branch, Bromley and Company, that did a lot of postcards for AMC. Other companies also, those postcards would have been in color. So there are a lot of cards available. Great Gulf camps. These really no longer exist as camps. Great Gulf is a section near the White Mountains. Pretty much this is a lean-to. And it's written here, Great Gulf camps, camps with the great within the great in the Great Gulf. It's obviously very primitive, and we'd have to say that this is a real photo postcard. Greenleaf Hut opened in 1930. It's undergone many revisions and today has solar panels on it. Lake of the Clouds is near the summit of Mount Washington. The Lake of the Clouds hut opened in 1900, and shortly after that, AMC constructed a small hut that would accommodate 6 people. This was constructed after 2 hikers attending a meeting on the summit of Mount Washington perished in June 1900. The others went up by what was referred to as the carriage road. Mount Washington is the highest summit in the northeast of 6,288 feet. It's recorded wind speeds of 231 miles per hour, wind chills of minus 108. And earlier this year, in February of this year, cold temperature of minus 46. It is the goal of many people to hike Mount Washington if they don't hike anything else in New Hampshire. And it is a difficult hike. There are at least 6 or 7 ways that you can hike it, but you can also go up an auto road, formerly called the carriage road, or the cog railway, which, because of environmental factors, is somewhat controversial. I would say generally the AMC doesn't like things like the cog railway because of pollution factors. Nevertheless, it's very, very historical. It's over, I think it's about 150 years old, 1869, I believe. So it's there anyway. But you can even drive up yourself if you want to. And so there are a lot of ways to get to the summit of Mount Washington. Here's the summit in a frost storm. Shorey took many postcards of the summit of Mount Washington in the snow and bad weather. And here's the hut. I have been to all of the huts at one time or another, except the first one that we saw, the Cottonouche summit. I was above it and I looked down on it, but I didn't actually go into the building. But this is the Lake of the Clouds hut. I've been here several times. And so this is a later card by the number. This is probably in the early 1950s. And you'll notice the hikers look a lot different from what they looked at like in some of the earlier postcards. The Lonesome Lake Hut is over near where the Old Man of the Mountain was. In fact, it's right behind it practically. And AMC had a hut here. They still have a hut here. This hut that you see here was demolished in the mid-60s. The original hut was given to AMC by the state of New Hampshire. And as I said, this is in the western region of the White Mountains. And here's different views of the hut. The Madison Spring hut, and again, this postcard is probably about 1909, 1910, and it does have that rubber stamp at the bottom. A small stone cabin was erected here with 4 bunks. In 1906, it was expanded to 24 guests, and that's the building pictured here. Another building was put up in 1922, but it was destroyed in 1940 by a crew member who was transferring gasoline, sad to say, unfortunately. And I use the term crew member. If you're a part of the crew of the Appalachian Mountain Club, crew is not spelled C-R-E-W. It's spelled C-R-O-O-O. They just one of those things that's part of the culture, as it were, of the Appalachian Mountain Club. These postcards show nice views of both of the buildings. This card is very interesting. It shows the building, it shows burrows with pack materials for the new Mount Madison hut, 1940. There are actually several cards related to this event of building the new hut with burrows. I would say, based on the many members of the Appalachian Mountain Club that I know well, they would view this as a no-no today. They would view this as animal abuse. So things have changed over the years. So this is 1940, so that's what, 85 years ago. Anyway, it is a very nice card. Notice that this card is not numbered. So it was probably short-lived. I'll explain more about that later. Pinkham Notch. Pinkham Notch is, if you go to the White Mountains and you go in the Eastern Slope region, it's the main area where you would be. It's a starting point to hike Mount Washington for many, many people. Pinkham Notch obviously still exists, but the AMC hut here has changed its name, and I'll explain to you why in a minute. There's always been a rather large area here where people could stay. Stay for one night, 2 nights, a week, whatever. Here's the same lodge, Pinkham Notch Camp, it's referred to here, in winter. Here's another one. Notice the numbering system here is, this card is P17. P referring to a series that Shorey did for Pinkham Notch. This is only, I would say, maybe 6 or 8 miles south of Gorham, where his studio was located. The old cars are nice in some of these. So this would seem to be probably in the mid to late 20s. Mount Washington is in the background. Someone from the AMC Archives Department probably could identify those 2 men standing at the door as workers at this camp. This card is probably one of the ones that I value the most, that I like the most. There are 3 people there. And the man on the left is Joe Dodge. If you want to stay at Pinkham Lodge camps, today, you would stay at Joe Dodge Lodge. Joe Dodge was AMC Hut's manager from 1922 to 1958. He was the one that came up with the recommendation that all huts in the White Mountains should be 1 day apart. When he says 1 day apart, that means for through hikers, for people going from one location to another. Joe is shown here with Arthur Whitehead. He's the guy in the middle. And over on, I hope you can see this, over on the extreme right is a Model T Ford truck, affectionately known as Ringtail. I don't know who the person is on the right, but the person in the middle, Arthur Whitehead, was an AMC employee in 1925 and 1926. See, a goal of many people that become interested in the mountains of New Hampshire and New England is to hike what's referred to as the 4,000 footers, Mount Washington being the highest. There are 48 in New Hampshire and 65 in all of New England, Vermont and Maine. Vermont has 5 and Maine has 14. They've actually changed it over the years. One time they had 14, one time they had 15. But anyway, there are 65 throughout New England. So people have that as a goal. I had as a goal myself. I finished at about 1999. And it really is quite a nice thing to do because, again, you see the mountains from the inside out. And Joe Dodge had that goal of setting up these huts so people could stay in the mountains. They didn't have to come down, as it were. And the next slide shows the back of this postcard, and this is one of the reasons why I treasure it. It is Joe Dodge's signature, and I've had that verified, Pinkham Notch, and Arthur Whitehead. And he signed it Goofin Paradise, which I'm sure it was for these men at the time. And here's a view of a typical winter activity. So if you were up there today, there's plenty of snow up there. You may want to do cross-country skiing, and that's what is being done here. And here's the camp. These buildings that I'm showing you from Pinkham Notch do not exist anymore. They've all been replaced by quite a few years ago, I would say 30 or 35 at least, with a new building. So there's all kind of accommodations for sleeping there, for meals. So if you just happen to be coming by and you wanted a meal, and it's good food. Obviously, you're not ordering off an extensive menu, but it is home cooked style food. And here's the same building in winter. And there's an nice interior view of one of the huts. And look at this one with the Victrola in the center on the right, type of chairs. So that's card 1080. And then the next one, 1173, shows the same room with a piano added and maybe a few more furnishings. So I would say this is probably early 1940s, the other one early 1930s. Oh, AMC signs. These are kind of fun to look at because AMC has a very, very extensive and useful guidebook for the mountains of New Hampshire, the White Mountains. And so, they encourage things like hiking. And so the signage is very good. Obviously, these are old signs. This is probably early 1930s. And here's a couple of them. That's at Pinkham Notch. There's a different one at Pinkham Notch with a hut in the background. And this is right inside the mountains. Again, it's got the rubber stamp sign near the Glen House, which is really not very. This is actually closer to Randolph on Route 2. Mount Madison and the Mount Madison hut would be something that people would hike from this area as opposed to Pinkham Notch. And that's the Great Gulf. That's that whole area to the east of Mount Washington that people hike all the time. Some get lost there. Three Mile Island is really quite a bit south of this area. It's not in the White Mountains. It's on Lake Winnipesaukee, which is closer to Laconia. So this is at least 70 miles from Gorham. So these are some of the postcards that Shorey did outside of the White Mountains. This is an AMC camp, but it's not in the White Mountains. And there are some really nice cards of this. Quite a few. I have quite a few of, I'm just obviously showing you a sample of these cards. There's the dining room. Looks like a nice place to have a meal. And there is mail time for the Crew, CROO. I have a nice chrome postcard dated 1969, and the caption is 3 Mile Island Crew, CROO. Tuckerman Ravine is very close to Pinkham Notch. And it's a very, very popular area for spring skiers in particular, in May and even into June. The skiing is very dangerous there because of avalanche. And the AMC established a shelter here. Notice that it's quite a large shelter, too. This has changed over the years. This is the new AMC shelter. This went in about 1954. But take a look at the people on this card. New Tuckerman Ravine Shelter. The guy in the middle has long skis, which were very popular then. He has no shirt on. The guy over on the left has no shirt on. That's a very popular skiing activity for men in the Tuckerman Ravine area. And as I said, it's difficult skiing. People every year die here, and there's avalanches here that have killed people over the years. Frequent, not an unusual thing. Here, these cards are sequentially numbered as I scanned them, and so they were all about the same time. My estimate is 1954 and 1955. New Tuckerman Ravine Shelter. You may say, well, why did you make a postcard of these people sitting on the floor? And that might be a good question, but culturally, I think it's a great card for that reason. Again, he was taking pictures from the mountains looking out, not the other way around. Here's a postcard of Tuckerman Ravine. And if you look closely, those black kind of like dots on the left are people skiing down. So the terrain is very difficult. I hiked down Tuckerman's Ravine one summer from Mount Washington. This comes from Mount Washington. And believe it or not, I was crazy at the time. I was with a friend of mine, and it was night. We, as they say, bit off more than you can chew. And we wanted to get down, and we did go down it, but it was difficult going down at 8 o'clock at night in August, and it was dark. But that shows the shelter that you saw on another card. Here's some more skiers there. And there you get a good view of Tuckerman Ravine also. Notice the people are not dressed like typical skiers because this would have been in May, not April even, but May or even in June. And sometimes there's snow up there right through the summer. You know, if you went in the middle of August, there'd in all likelihood be snow on Tuckerman's Ravine. The Zealand Falls shelter was established in 1931 and as part of Joe Dodge's plan to have the shelters available to people who want to stay in the mountains one day apart. This became the first shelter that was open in the winter. Some of them are not. And when I say shelter, all of these that I've shown you, AMC provides extensive, well, that's a subjective word, but they provide meals for people that are staying in the evening. There are bunk beds. Okay, this is not luxurious accommodations in the slightest. But anyway, this was the first one to provide, that was open in the winter. The one over at Carter Notch is open in the winter now. Pinkham Notch, obviously, Joe Dodge Lodge is open year round. Here's another one of Zealand. And you may say, well, that doesn't show much. And, you know, maybe it doesn't, but this is typical Shorey photography. And again, I would not classify this as a real photo postcard. Maybe it was only sold at AMC huts. I don't know. Okay, other cards. This is not an AMC card. It isn't Pinkham Notch. But the reason I'm showing you this card is I believe from looking at dealer stock for Shorey postcards, trying to find new ones for my collection over many, many, many years, this one is the one that shows up the most. Number 78, Glen Ellis Falls in Pinkham Notch. So if you were at Joe Dodge Lodge, you could hike to this. You know, it might take you a half hour or so to get here. But this one, you know, if you go on eBay, it's going to say RPCC, Real Photo Postcard. But to me, it's not. I'm sure there were literally thousands of this postcard produced. It's a nice, clear postcard, beautiful postcard. Okay, this is another postcard that I really cherish. If it was not for the statement at the bottom, I would not know that this photograph was by Guy Shorey. The postcard is 1906, so it's before his numbering system started. We're able to identify the picture as the start of what was referred to as the carriage road, today referred to as the auto road, up Mount Washington, which you see in the background. And at this point, it goes over the Peabody River, very close to the Route 16 that goes by this area. And it says, the message is great. One of Guy Shorey's, isn't it fine? All well now, Gorham, New Hampshire, July 1906. So if it had not been for that message, we wouldn't know that it was a Shorey card, and I'm sure there are many others that are just discarded as being nothing because They're not identified. Early Guy Shorey postcards. That's what I mean. And here's the back of the postcard. Notice it's an undivided back, so we know it's before 1908, the year that we believe, well, we know that Shorey started the numbering system. It's postcard, as I said, it's postmarked 1906 in Cascade, New Hampshire. Another nice thing about this postcard is Cascade, New Hampshire, is a discontinued post office. I don't collect postmarks of discontinued post offices. Many people do. It's just something I never got into. Cascade is really a hamlet, a hovel even, between Gorham and Berlin. Berlin. The people up there in that area don't say Berlin like we would say. The syllable is Berlin, not Berlin. I don't know the reason for that, but believe me, that's how they say the word. Cascade, though, was this area where there were paper mills, and it was administratively, it is part of Berlin. And today, there's just houses there. At one time, there was a Catholic church and school. Today, about the only thing is a pizza store. And someone told me the pizza is very good there, but I haven't experienced it yet. And as you drive up the highway, before you get to Berlin, there is a very small sign that says Cascade. And I did, about 2 years ago, I went over there to explore it. But I think this card is important for that reason. He did produce several of these oblong postcards. Interestingly, this one is not in the Eastern Slope area. This one is over in the Western White Mountains, and on the left it shows Indian Head, which is a rock formation, and there's an Indian Head motel there. It's really quite an extensive, long established, not a motel, but a whole complex of buildings where you can stay. The Connecticut chapter of AMC had an event. They always have an event in the fall, a week-long event, and they rent a lodging facility that can accommodate about 150 people. And it's really a lottery to get into it. They have hikes each day. And I was up here last fall in September. Guy Shorey's brother, Urban Shorey, was also a photographer, interestingly enough. He produced postcards, but nowhere the number that Guy produced. I probably have 20 Urban Shorey postcards. In fact, I bought 3 or 4 at the show in Wichita in October. Lancaster is probably about 30 or 35 miles west of Gorham. And this is a great postcard. Okay, the sled dog team of 1937 for this guy that's pictured. Whether that's Urban Shorey, I don't think it is, but it could be. I guess I could find out from the Lancaster Historical Society. Most Shorey postcards, I would say, are of the mountains. And generally, from a collecting standpoint, people aren't really interested in postcards of mountains, generally speaking. I got interested in them when I was hiking the 4,000 footers and hiking a lot in New Hampshire in the 1990s. And I would drive south of Boston, in a Boston suburb just south of Boston, and I would drive up to the White Mountains and I would meet friends. Very often an AMC trip. They have hikes scheduled for every day of the week, and I would join some other people and I would hike for the day. And then we'd go out for supper at 4 or 5 o'clock. They would all have a glass of wine, but I would not because I had to drive 150 miles back. And when I got home at 11 o'clock in the evening, I would look at my postcards and then have a glass of wine. And I would come across these Shorey postcards, and I would say, "Oh, these are really nice postcards of the White Mountains." And I was a member, in fact, I was a charter member of the Granite State, the New Hampshire Postcard Club, which was founded in 1983. And in the roster that came out of members every year, there would be a number of people that would list Shorey is one of their postcard collecting interests. So I was in touch with them, and it was that's how I got interested in these postcards. But all of these topics that I've listed here are possibilities for individual presentations. In other words, he made so many postcards of these things. AMC obviously is the one that you're seeing here, but camps, disasters. See, I know a lot of people collect disaster postcards. He made many postcards of fires, freshets. Do you know what that is? Freshet. I probably have 20 different ones from the teens and 20s and even into 30s. It's when the water freezes on rivers in the spring. It would primarily be the Androscoggin River up in Gorham, and then it melts and it creates a mess. And some of them are pretty interesting, though. So he made many postcards of those. Dolly Cop is the campground that a lot of people stay at the base of Mount Washington. I told you that's a person. And a lot of postcards. Floods, another one. At the Wichita show, I bought a Shorey postcard. I only bought one there that I didn't think I needed. And it's definitely a real photo postcard because it does have Shorey's name on the back, but it's postmarked Berlin. And it's a building on fire. And I thought it might be the Opera House in Gorham fire of, I believe it was 1914. And I compared it, and it's not. So I was in touch with the Berlin Historical Society, but they didn't think it was a Berlin view. So I need to examine that more. I think it's in Gorham. Shorey's cameras are in the Berlin Historical Society building. And it's quite a nice building. They have a lot of things in it. So that's something that you could see. Other things, guest houses, many, many postcards of guest houses, both exteriors and interiors. Mountains are like those if they're named. Parades, all kinds of parades in Gorham and Berlin in particular. Public buildings, skiing. Skiing was a relatively new thing in the 20s and 30s, and he came up with a lot of cards on that. Snowstorms, not only on the summit of Mount Washington, but in the cities. Winter Carnival is a big event in Gorham, and he made many, many, many postcards of the Winter Carnival. Winter on Mount Washington, as I already said. And Wanalesset is not in the eastern slope. It's a bit farther south, but for some reason he made a lot of postcards of that. But again, I would say that probably, I don't know, 75% of his postcards are of the mountains. This slide gives you a description of Shorey postcards in his numbering system. He had numbered postcards from 1908 to 1958. 1,532. The Mount Washington Observatory Museum has his list. And several years ago, 30 or 35, someone transcribed the list from the handwritten document in word processing. In I think they used Word Perfect at the time. And so we do have that as a document. But like many postcard publishers, there are more than 1,532 postcards because, for example, his first postcard is a view of Gorham from the mountain. I have three different ones of postcard number one. So many of the others, there are different shots of the same thing. The unnumbered postcards, this is where the confusion comes in, are infinite. We don't know how many there were, hundreds and hundreds. I would say the unnumbered postcards are the scarcer ones because they were for short events like the Winter Carnival of 1932 or a Freshet of 1926. There are specially numbered cards for some of these things, like you see here, these camps and Kearsarge is a particular region of the White Mountains, Evans Notch, and so forth. In my collection, I have 2,243 Shorey postcards. And you might be wondering, what am I going to do with them? Well, it is in my will that they're going to the Mount Washington Observatory Museum. So I think that's a good place for them. They do have a small collection of these cards there, but not, and they're aware of this. The director of the museum is really someone that I'm quite friendly with. We become friends, and anyway, they're happy to receive the collection of Shorey postcards. And so that is the presentation.
Wow, wonderful. Just it's just amazing, isn't it? What we can find on postcards.
Just, I want to ask a personal, not a personal question, but another question that's sort of outside what you've told us so far. All these huts seem to be very well constructed, and obviously they've been around for a long time. But are there any truly huts, that is to say, lean-tos or something other than real construction buildings?
There are some lean-tos in the Randolph. There's another club there, and it works closely with AMC, the Randolph Mountain Club. And they have some lean-tos that you can stay at. And, lean-tos are a little bit different. It's more remote in it's like an open area. I've stayed at a number of those when I was hiking the 4,000 footers and backpacking, doing overnight trips. But yeah, they do exist. Yeah.
But for the most part, it's the huts are really the constructed buildings.
Yes, they're constructed buildings. Yeah.
Okay, moving right along now. The first question that we have here is from, of all people, Hal Ottaway, who says the Dolly Cop campground says 1943. Is that the year that the postcard was made during World War II?
Yeah, I believe it is. And fortunately, and very surprisingly, Shorey did that with a lot of postcards right at the margin at the bottom of the card where it's titled, there's a date printed there. And I think that's kind of nice. Yeah, that particular one is 1943. Dolly Cop that's been around for a long time, well over 100 years. That's a place where you would go and set up a tent and sleep. And they do have a building, so if you want to take a shower, you could pay, I don't know, 25 cents or $1 to take a shower. Well, it's probably $5 now. But, you can have a fire at night and, there are nice views from there day and night. The sky has a lot of stars in it there because there aren't many buildings around. But it is, and there's a lot of postcards of Dolly Cop.
Okay, Nancy Ann wants to know if she could where she could find a copy of the article on the real photos versus the printed postcards.
I don't know. That's what I've asked
Did,
Dennis to see if he can do that. I- it's one of those things. It was a long time ago that I read that article, and it could have been in bars. If it's in bars, it's going to be more difficult to locate. But Dennis is categorizing all the articles that were in Postcard Collector for Dawn as part of the American Institute of Deltology, part of their project.
Okay, Halligan says, is the cog railway still operating?
Oh, yeah, that operates from May until October. And it definitely is fun to go up it. I went up it with my wife once, but the first time I went, it was a really cloudy, damp day, and you could not see anything. It wasn't worth going up, but it is fun. It's sort of one of those things that's historic New Hampshire, so they're never going to get rid of it. But I know environmental groups don't like it because of the smoke that's emitted.
Okay, Halligan says, do these cards have a dot pattern, or are they without a dot pattern?
No, they do have a dot pattern if you look at it. And, so we know from that point of view that they are photographic style postcards. I know what you mean, without it. But the reason I brought that up is I think it's a misnomer. Any postcard in this style, people say it's a real photo postcard. It's not a real photo postcard. If there were 1,000 postcards made of that waterfall, it's not a real photo postcard. We think of real photo postcards as something that is valuable, something that there were only a few made of. Maybe you disagree with me, but that's how I feel about it.
Hal, do you mean or do you mean to suggest that if it has a dot pattern, it can't possibly be a real photo?
well, I'm thinking that would be the case, unless they've taken a picture of something that's printed. But it was always my feeling that if it had a dot pattern, then it's printed. But I can understand what he's talking about, the rubber stamp business at the bottom or printed. But I just
Dennis,
don't know.
Dennis,
Hal's right. If it's a real photo postcard, is a photograph printed in a darkroom, and therefore it will not have dots.
Yeah,
The dots indicate it was screened to be printed on a printing press. So that's the difference.
Right. That everything I've
Right.
researched
So-
said, get out your magnifying glass,
Right.
and if you see dots, it's not a real photo
yeah,
postcard.
and as I said, his printing press is available in the Berlin Historical Society. You can view it there. What he used, I don't know how many years he used that, but
So were any of these, I have a photography background
oh,
and I used to make gelatin silver prints, which is what I think all the real photo postcards are. I haven't actually read anything that actually says that, because most things aren't that technical. But yeah, the dot pattern would be a photo-based lithograph, which is a mechanical process.
yeah,
But there's also what I've also discovered with postcards are color types.
oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, were any of these color types, like looking at them online, I can't tell. If I saw it, I could. Because this is another place where I see all this confusion on eBay. In photographic history, color types are considered an early photographic printing process because it was hand done, even though they made a plate to do it. And there's a lot of confusion around those as to what they are, how to classify them. And I'm wondering, were any of these color types?
I don't
Because
believe.
you could make like maybe 100 from a plate, but before you had to have a new plate.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so they weren't huge, but did he do that?
I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Oh, when you look at them, they don't have a dot pattern.
Well, I'm looking
But
at a
they don't,
postcard
but
now.
they also don't, but they don't have that really sharp, crisp look of a real photo. Because
So,
a lot of the real photos were actually contact prints.
yeah, this postcard that I'm looking at here, I bought at the York show 2 weeks ago. And it's the only Shorey postcard that I purchased there. And it's rubber stamped High School, Gorham, New Hampshire. And I'm looking at it with a magnifying glass, and I don't see any dot pattern on it whatsoever. There's nothing like that on it. This postcard is 1914. So I don't know if that's helpful. And, this, I would consider this postcard a real photo postcard. I don't think there's many of it.
Yeah.
Never seen it. So I don't know if you can see it.
Well, no, I can't see anything. Somehow I lost the feed.
Oh,
I can see the line of people, but I can't see what's on the screen.
yeah.
I don't know what I did.
Philip Biederbach wants to point out that how much he's enjoyed the talk until he saw your sweatshirt.
Oh. Well, I want to ask Bill a question, because I know Bill went to Dartmouth. When you were up there, were you involved with any of the hiking activities? Because Dartmouth maintains a very nice lodge on Mount Musalaki, which is one of the beautiful 4,000-foot hikes in the western section of the White Mountains. But, the comment that I made about restrictive membership, and I know that was long gone when you went there, but I've just thrown that out because I know you were a graduate of Dartmouth.
The guy across the hall from me was a chubber, and chubbers were the guys who hiked. I personally view nature as something that should be seen through a picture window. So let's see. Here we are. Susan Lane says, have you seen, or almost like a footnote, see Bob Bogdan and Todd Weston's Real Photo Postcards? Are you aware of that book?
Yeah, I am aware of the book. Yeah. He might have been one of the author. He might have been the author, the first name that you mentioned.
Bob Bogdan.
Yeah, he might have been the author of that article.
I'm born and raised in New Hampshire, born in Hanover, New Hampshire, at Mary Hitchcock Memorial Hospital when FDR was president, but it's now known as Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center. And it's just it's an incredible presentation of places that you know and love. The one thing that the pictures of the cabins don't convey is how majestic they are. When you stand on a hill and look at Tuckerman's Ravine, it's like, wow, it takes your breath away. So it's just they're really phenomenal. They're really phenomenal. So I just applaud you being a hiker in that area because I know it's not easy.
I want to add on to what you just said. Thank you for that comment. Hiking in the White Mountains is extremely difficult, but I didn't know that when I was hiking because I always thought this is what hiking was about. And you start pretty much at sea level in the White Mountains. Well, then I started going on trips to other parts of the country, actually all over the world, Patagonia, all through the Alps. I've gone on many, many trips. But my first trip out of the area was to Glacier National Park in Montana. And it was an Appalachian Mountain Club trip. They sponsor a lot of trips all over the place. And it was wonderful hiking. The views there are phenomenal in Glacier. It was one of my favorite trips. But the hiking is easy. It's very, very easy, well-developed roads. In Colorado, for example, Mount Elbert, the highest summit in Colorado, 14,000 foot up, and it's the highest mountain. It's really a very easy hike. It's not difficult. There's very difficult hiking, of course, in Colorado, like Long's Summit near Estes Park. That's like the most difficult hike I ever went on, ever. I was insane when I did it. But anyway, the hiking in the White Mountains is difficult hiking.
Well, we thank you, Peter, so very, very much. And thank you, Bill, for doing that. Thanks so very, very much for being here today. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.